The neon Ember Room sign sputtered like a bad memory, throwing a red wash across the police tape and dust. I unlocked the front door with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. My father had died 2 nights ago when he fell down the back stairs of his own club, and I was here to pick up keys, papers, whatever was left of him. That's when I smelled it. Not just old liquor and sweat, but something new. Paper turning to smoke. In the office, an ashtray smoldered with the ends of burned ledger pages, the edges curling like black petals. Someone had been here after the cops. Someone had started the fire and then decided not to finish it. I grabbed the metal wastebasket and smothered the flame with my coat, coughing hard. When I lifted the charred stack, I saw the last line still unburned, traced in my father's tidy block print. When Maya Bennett, a 31-year-old black attorney in Chicago's Loop, inherits her estranged father's struggling Bronzeville jazz club, she expects headaches, not hell. James Blue Bennett, a once brilliant sax player turned small-time owner, was more ghost than parent and a magnet for trouble. His sudden, accidental death exposes a secret ledger, a coded payout labeled Ash Wednesday, and a quiet war over who controls the club's past and future. As Maya steps back into the South Side world she left for law school, where sound carries late and people count favors like rent, she collides with men who smiled at her father's photos but never signed their real names. A detective with his own history pushes for the truth. A cartel emissary comes collecting, and aging musicians guard memories that can still get them killed. The Ember Room, a place built on black joy and jazz, hides a pipeline of laundered cash. To save herself and protect the neighborhood her father betrayed and loved, Maya must read the music in his lies and decide how far she go to rewrite the ending. Quick heads up before we jump in. If you're into real stories, strange disappearances, and the kind of truths people try to bury, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Turn on the bell so you don't miss what comes next. All right, let's get into it. The key was warm from my palm when it slipped into the office door. The lock turned with a soft metallic sigh. Inside, everything sagged. The particle board desk curved under the weight of invoices. The blinds had a slat missing, and a hole in the carpet had been covered by a bar mat. It felt like my father held together by quick fixes, jokes, and nothing that could bear weight for long. I set my briefcase on the chair and fanned the charred ledger pages on the desk. Numbers showed through here and there, like bones under thin skin. My father's handwriting, small and neat, marched down each line next to names that were only initials. Credits and debits in even sums, precise as a metronome. The last entry, though, wasn't numbers. It was a phrase that didn't belong in a ledger Ash Wednesday last drop. I traced the letters with my nail, feeling the deep bite of his pen. He had always picked days and songs to mark things. He taught me to count measures at the kitchen table, tapping knives and forks to make rhythm when Mom worked a double at the hospital, and he tuned a sax with rubber bands and prayers. Ash Wednesday. The words chilled me, not just because of church and ashes and dust, but because my father liked metaphors he could spend. If he wrote Ash Wednesday, he meant a ritual, a turning, a clean start paid for by fire. I stopped myself. In the mirror behind the desk, I watched a grief I didn't understand lay itself over my face, thin, stubborn. I had cut my hair short for court, kept the curls tight and sharp like the lines of my suits. Today I wore a black dress under a gray coat that still smelled faintly like rain. I tried on my courtroom expression, reserved, reasonable. It collapsed. The office door creaked. I spun, heart jumping to my throat. "Relax, baby," a voice said, warm with smoke. "If I wanted you gone, you wouldn't have heard the door." "Auntie Risa," I exhaled, relief and annoyance mixing as Teresa King, who wasn't my aunt but claimed the title by volume, swept in. She wore a leopard print headscarf, gold hoops the size of cookies, and a coat that might have been mink in the 1980s, and still had opinions today. She paused at the smell, nose wrinkling. Someone cooked paperwork? Looks like it, I said. You have a key? She dangled a ring with a wry smile. You know Jimmy gave me a key to everything but his heart. Well? Her gaze softened, snagging on the ashtray. I'm sorry, Maya. I am. I know what y'all two were, and weren't. I appreciate you, I said. It felt small. She crossed herself and stepped closer, sweeping ash into the trash with the edge of a flyer. Police tied off the stairwell. They said, watch your step. I told Sergeant whoever I've been walking bad stairs since riot days. He can keep his advice. Her eyes cut to mine. You think he fell? I don't know. I shook my head, the words hating each other on the way out. He left me this circus. I figured I should. Count the rings? She said, studying me. Baby, this place is older than both of us and meaner than men, but it had nights. Her smile slid back. And your father had debts. I know, I said. I saw some names in the ledger. I didn't mention Ash Wednesday. Not yet. You know anything about a last drop? Her laugh was a dry gust. At the end of a set, a man will play the last drop of blood out his horn if he thinks the night is listening. Jimmy liked to talk like that, but he also liked to owe people who don't clap. Cartel? I asked. The word scratched my throat. She shut the office door with a quiet click. He got into bed with men who changed names more than clothes. But baby, he loved you. He loved Evelyn, too. He just loved the crowd more, sometimes because the crowd never asked him to come home on time. She touched my cheek, thumb rough from years of mic stands and winter. Funerals at 11 tomorrow. I told Deacon White to reserve the family pew. You bring that fancy firm face if you want, but bring your real one, too. After she left, the quiet pressed in, warm off the back bar, cool near the door. The club room outside the office was a long rectangle, grease-soft wooden floors. The stage raised 2 steps and bracketed by velvet curtains that had given up being red a decade ago.
Canaan Storage. Ask for Henry.
Miss Bennett.
Photos lined the walls, black and white and color, glass milky with age. There was my father younger than me, eyes laughing, arm around a woman who wasn't my mother. There was Mom once, lips tight, standing at the end of a table of women with their coats still on. We had come for a birthday. I remembered the cake collapsing when someone clapped too hard. The drummer from that night was in one photo looking off to the side, jaw set like he was listening to something outside the frame. I took a picture of the ledger pages with my phone and slipped the charred stack into my briefcase. When I reached for the desk drawer, it stuck. I yanked. It flew open and a trumpet mouthpiece rolled out, heavy and cold against my palm. Engraved on the back was my father's old line, "Play like Ite owes you." I almost smiled. When I looked back into the drawer, I saw an envelope taped under the lip. Inside were a strip of photo negatives and a key wrapped in blue tape, the kind you use for house painting, with numbers written in Sharpie. Faith Trust Box 74. Every good lie is dressed like a truth, my evidence professor had said. I locked the office and walked the club once more. A glass sat on the end of the bar, ring-stained. Whoever had tried to burn the ledger had stayed for a drink. On the exit, I stopped under the neon sign, its hum in my teeth. Outside, Bronzeville was noon gray. The green line rattled, and the corner store was working its 3rd boom box of the year, all green, bleeding through a speaker that had never been treated. Right. A boy dragged a scooter on the sidewalk and eyed me like I might buy it. A bus roared past. A woman across the street called out to a man in a white socks jacket. He didn't turn. By the time I hit the loop, the winter light had given up. The glass canyons of Wacker and LaSalle carved wind into knives. I took the revolvine door to the firm with the rest of the men in charcoal wool and smells like cologne ads. The receptionist, a white woman with lashes like wings, pursed her lips in what the partners considered warmth. "Maya, I heard about your father," she said, sympathetic and unhelpful. "Are you back already?" "I'm not a pilot," I said, the joke sour. "I'm still on the Henderson motion. I'll be in my office." Tyler Ross, a senior partner who had taken me on because I billed like a machine and closed like a saint, appeared at my door before I sat. His jaw was cleanly shaved, and his watch probably knew more than most neighborhood pastors. "How are you holding up?" he asked, jaw dimpling in performance grief. "I'm okay," I said. "I need tomorrow morning off for the service." Of course, he said gently. "Take your time." "Well, take the morning. We've got to file by 5, but I can cover if needed." He leaned against the frame, lowering his voice as if to speak under the weight of his own empathy. "I know how it is. When my father passed, I felt like water with nowhere to go." He cleared his throat. "Sometimes work helps." "Sometimes," I said. He looked at my hands. I tucked them into my lap. As he straightened to leave, he hesitated. One parent from the Hendersons asked for a different associate, but I explained the optics. He smiled at the word. "You're invaluable." "The optics," I repeated, chewing the syllables. "Black attorney, black family, charter school case. Good fit, palatable to the camera if needed. I'll meet their deadline." "A taggerl," he said, catching himself on the last syllable with a laugh. "Sorry, old habits." He closed my door, but not my ears. I stared at the Henderson file until the letters blurred and reshaped into the numbers from my father's ledger. I slid the envelope onto my desk blotter and peeled the blue tape back, careful as surgery. Faith Trust Box 74. A bank, then, if it still existed. The key was a small brass square with a notch at the top, the kind you used for safe deposit boxes. I set it on my palm. It felt heavier than it looked. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail and thought about my father's slight smile when I pulled away from him at 13. The way he respected being iced out, even when it killed him. I picked up. "Maya Bennett?" The voice was male, low, with a rasp like a match being lit. A good radio voice if you didn't see the face. "This is Detective Caleb Norwood, 35th and Michigan. You got a minute?" "I have 60 seconds, I said, because lawyering makes you a fool. "You're the D on my father's case." "That'd be nice." "No, the DA wants to age out his pension paperwork. I'm the one who still likes questions." A pause, polite as a push. "I went by the club. You keep a lighter in your purse?" "I don't smoke." "I can tell when someone lies. You don't sound like a liar." There was a burned ledger in the office. Our techs missed it or they didn't. Either way, that makes me itch. He coughed, a muted sound. "Your father's knuckles were scuffed, and his left shoulder was dislocated when he hit bottom. If he fell clean, that shoulder don't do that. You understand where I'm standing?" "In the gap between what's written and what's true," I said before I could stop myself. He laughed softly. "I like you already. I'm not telling you to do my job. But if you find something, don't burn it. Don't fix it before I see it. And watch who walks in the door." He exhaled. "You got enemies?" "I have deadlines," I said. "Alive enemies are better than deadlines." His voice warmed a degree. "I'm sorry for your loss, Miss Bennett, despite whatever you two had between you." "Thank you," I said, because I was raised right. "Detective, you smoke Santa Muerte?" He didn't answer immediately. "Only on my day off when I want to die young." Why? Someone left one near the staircase. I lied to see if he'd bite. That what you smoke? He chuckled. You fishing at lunch? Santa Muerte is not a cop cigarette. That's a South Border brand, sometimes sold at weekend marts. If I was you, I'd buy a lock. After I hung up, I stared at the ceiling. The popcorn texture made shadows like a night city. Santa Muerte. Holy death. My father had always been dramatic, but not this dramatic. I wrote the name on a Post-it and stuck it to my monitor, then slid the key into my blazer pocket like a guilty secret and went back to work long enough for the world to look normal. The funeral was a crowded quiet. Ebenezer Baptist still wore its 1970s baptismal blues and the smell of pledge. The choir sang Trouble of the World, and my mother's best friend Janice squeezed my elbow so hard I felt the shape of her rings. I sat in the family pew, like Auntie Risa said, which meant the eyes felt comfortable on my neck. People who knew me as a kid, and people who didn't know me at all, leaned in to whisper about the music, like it owed them something. The women from the club lined the back like a row of bright flowers. The men who had once been handsome stood against the walls, hands in pockets, making themselves look small, as if they could shrink their sins. The casket was closed. That was Risa's call. She said Jimmy always wanted to be remembered for his grin, not the way he went out. A young preacher with edges still on his words spoke about the prodigal son, and I wanted to stand and tell him the prodigal daughter had emotion due at 5. But then the band struck up a tune my father used to hum when he made pancakes that were more like language than food, and the room blurred again. After the internment at Oak Woods, after the repast of chicken that never got cold because everyone moved fast, after the aunties' hands and the uncles, jokes and the quiet nods from people who had not come to cry, but to make sure the math added up even after all that, the day was not over. Because the day didn't care. At 3:30, Risa and I went to a low brick building on Prairie where a lawyer named Mr. Halperin kept an office between a payday loan place and a "We buy gold and broken teeth" sign. He was small and old and wore a sweater vest that had loved one person very well. I had called ahead and told him I was an attorney, and he had said, "Is that right? Good. Then you'll keep me honest?" The will was a mess with a flourish. My father had left the Ember Room to me, along with any and all cash flow, debts, and obligations attached to the property. He left his record collection to Auntie Risa, and his saxophone and other horn artifacts to a man named Isaac Taylor, who turned out to be Ike from the door, who had not come to the service, but had stood outside smoking and arguing with a pigeon. He left one thing to my mother, Evelyn, peace, and a photograph, which was either poetic or rude, given she had been gone 6 years. "There's a letter here, too," Halperin said, pinching the envelope like it might melt. He handed it to me, eyes on my face not in a nosy way, but the way old men watch a bridge in wind. I stepped to the window to read it. The paper was from the Club Ember Room crest in a faded burn. My father's hand again, tidy and trying to be humble. "Baby girl, if you are reading this, I am likely gone on. I could never get past how you looked at me after 13. You had a mirror for a face. Every time I saw myself in it, I turned away. That ain't a reason, just a confession. If I could have one thing, it would be a song you played for me that I never deserved. The club is yours. I mean that because I didn't know where else to leave my mess. The Ember is a good place, and a bad one. I made it both. There's money that ain't clean in the pipes. If I had more time, I would have ripped it out and started fresh. There's a thing called Ash Wednesday, but you shouldn't use it unless you need to. Ask Risa. Ask Ike. Caleb Norwood is a straight cop with a crooked laugh. You can trust him more than most. If you can keep the stage open, keep it. If you can't, close it with prayer and delete my number. I love you. I failed you. Those are both true at the same time. Your father still, Jimmy Blue. I folded the letter in on itself until it could not breathe, then opened it again and read it twice more, like it might change the third time. When I turned, Risa was watching me with eyes that had known all my bad birthdays. I shook my head, and she didn't ask. Everything straightforward? Mr. Halperin asked, seeing our faces and deciding not to understand. As straightforward as a bowl of eels, I said. What are the debts? He slid a stapled packet across the desk. Back taxes on the building, liquor license renewals. The kitchen hoods weren't up to code, but the inspector was a jazz fan. He cleared his throat. There is also a lien notice from a private lender. Not a bank. Sunrise Logistics. He looked at me. They move boxes. They moved into money. Where are they based? I asked, though I already knew I would hate the answer. Outside of town. South. Not on the map. Halperin said softly, as if he'd heard a dog in the hall. Your father assured me it was temporary. We stepped out into air that felt soothed by snow that hadn't fallen yet. Risa hugged herself. Sunrise Logistics, she said, as if tasting a bad salt. They came around the second winter. Jimmy couldn't make payroll. They smiled with all their teeth. I told him then, that's not smiling. That's a man checking his tongue for cuts. And Ash Wednesday? I asked. He said, ask you. She pinched her lips and looked away, toward the big brick school down the block, where kids in puffy coats leaped down the steps like life could never cut them. He didn't tell me enough. Just that if the water ever got as high as the stage, there was a clean way to burn the pipes. But burning never kept anybody's hands from getting hot. The safe deposit box key in my pocket felt like an accusation. I touched the square head through the wool of my coat, then dropped my hand as if someone could see me. I have to check the club, I said. You coming? I'm going to go cook for the boys on my block. They'll need hot food tonight. You come by after you check. I'll keep a plate warm. I'll bring a dessert, I said. Bring your coat, she replied, squinting at the sky. It's trying to snow. Back at the Ember, the day had slipped into a dull copper. I let myself into the office and found a note stuck under the paperweight, a brass mic perched on a marble base. The note was a receipt small as a prayer slip, folded in half. On it, someone had drawn a tiny skull with a halo. On the back, in an elegant hand. Tonight, 7 p.m. Final settlement. Don't be late. The skull smiled without lips. My phone said 6:08. I locked the office again, new lock from a quick stop at the Ace on 47th, and went to the bar, which had exactly 3 bottles worth saving, and a dozen that should have been recycled into church windows. I pulled a bar towel and wiped my palm. I didn't like the feeling of waiting for men whose idea of on time was the end of someone else's pulse. At 6:59, a man slid onto a bar stool like a roomer finding a seat. He wore a navy coat that didn't look expensive until you saw the stitching and realized only tailors with opinions would bother. His hair was neat, his beard trimmed tight to his jaw, his brown skin a shade that made his eyes, dark and watchful, look almost kind. He smiled at me as if I had already told a joke, and it had worked. Ms. Bennett, he said, warm as a friend. I'm Rafael Santos. Most people call me Rafi. I'm here on behalf of Sunrise. That's a beautiful word, I said, standing on the other side of the bar. Sunrise. Doesn't say a thing about what you carry. He laughed softly. We carry whatever people need us to. Today, what we need to carry is a balance sheet. Your father kept one with us. He was an artist. Art is expensive. What's the number? I asked. My hands were steady on the bar, and I was proud of that. I could feel the tremor coiled in my legs. 234,000 and change, Ruffy said. He slid a folder toward me. In it, a neat chart of numbers that grew with interest as carelessly as weeds. Not much, all things considered. The Ember Room has history. History costs. I'm an attorney, I said. You don't need to sell me poetry when math will do. We prefer math, he agreed, and relationships. Your father had one with us. We'd love to have one with you. You have good instincts. We've watched you a long time from far away. It would be lovely to bring our chairs a little closer. I'm not taking on my father's debt, I said. Not without seeing every page, he signed. Oh, of course. He raised his palms, reassuring. We're not monsters throwing nets. You inherited assets, not obligations. Legally. But there are softer rules that run under the hard ones. We live by both. So let's call this a conversation among neighbors. An exchange of condolences. We extend our sympathy. You extend an understanding. Understanding of what? My mouth was dry. That this ledger is not for the fire, he said, eyes flicking to the office door. That you will call me before you call Mr. Norwood, who likes the sound of his own boots. That you will not look for Ash Wednesday. That if you find it, you will not use it. That if we come to collect something that is ours, a book, a box, a photograph, you will open the door and let us leave with it. He smiled again. In exchange, we won't make your life small and dim and short. We won't make your beautiful mother's house a memory. We won't make your job at the firm feel like a squeezed throat. You see? Soft rules. You threatened me in my father's bar, I said, the words slow, careful. But you chose such pretty words. That must have taken practice. It's a middle-aged thing, he said, amused. I also chose to come alone. At night, with no gun. That must count for something. It counts as arrogance, I said, even as I noticed the weight at his ankle. He shrugged. It counts as respect. Also, I like jazz. I don't like blood on stage. It dries ugly. He reached into his coat, and I tensed. He withdrew a card. Embossed, simple. No skull, no halo. Just sunrise in small letters and his name. Call me, Miss Bennett, before you call anyone else. Why me? I asked, surprising myself. Why do you care about me? Your father once played a song for my sister when she was sick. She got better. The song didn't do that, but I like to believe it helped. Also, I believe you are different from him. It interests me what different women do with the same matches. He rose. We talk soon. After he left, the room felt colder. I realized my shoulders had been up around my ears for 20 minutes. I let them fall. I poured a whiskey and didn't drink it. Just watched the way light caught the small gold flecks at the bottom of the glass, like dirt. I took out the safe deposit key and set it next to the sunrise card, then put both away like snakes that promised to be good. Home felt wrong. The little apartment in Hyde Park off 55th was tidy books stacked in honest columns, couch clean, plants still alive. The door showed no sign of forced entry, but I knew the room had been breathed in by someone while I was gone. The curtain had a new fold. The bathroom mirror was smeared where I didn't smear. I walked the perimeter like a cop on a TV show, and laughed at myself and called someone who knew the difference. Amir picked up on the second ring. You okay? He asked. He didn't say hello, because we had our own language for that. No, I said, because that was how languages stayed honest. Do you still keep a bat by your front door for decoration? Protection, he corrected, smiling in my ear. And yes, I'll bring it. He arrived 10 minutes later, hoodie over his head, gray coat unbuttoned. His beard had grown a little since the last time we'd pretended distance was good medicine. He walked in like the place used to know his steps, which it did. He scanned the room, then went straight to the bedroom and checked the windows, the closet, under the bed, the bathroom. When he came back, he set the bat against the wall. Whoever came in, they didn't want you to call the cops, he said. No mess, no message. Just news. We can be here whenever. News received, I said, sitting on the couch. The cushions hissed. I told him about the ledger, the burned pages, the key, Rafi, Sunrise, Detective Norwood. I left out the part about feeling like a 13-year-old girl whose father had not come to the school concert because he had a double set and a broken promise. So you're going to the bank? Amir asked. I can't not, I said. I'm a moth. You're fire, he corrected softly. He leaned forward, elbows on knees. We don't keep secrets, or we try not to until we do. Let me come with you. You're a public defender, I said. Your boss will love you being a +1 in a cartel-adjacent event. My boss can kiss my. He stopped himself and smiled. I know the bank manager at the Hyde Park branch. That help? Everyone knows somebody, I said, too sharp. He flinched. I'm sorry. I'm on edge. Don't apologize. His hand hovered near mine like it used to. He didn't touch me. Let me know when. I will, I said, lying a little because I didn't know what I would do until my feet did it. He stood and gave me a look that felt like a door I could still open. I'm sorry about your father, he said. He made a lot of noise, and then he made none. He was good at both, I said. After he left, I took a shower so hot the mirror disappeared. I went to bed without drying my hair and woke at 3 with my curls cold on my neck, dreams like thin sheets. I sat up and turned on the light. The room made no sense. The air was too still. I got up and went to the living room and sat on the floor with my back against the couch. Somewhere outside, a train wailed. A couple laughed on the sidewalk. The city never had the decency to sleep when you did. At 9 the next morning, I was at Faith Trust Bank on 53rd, staring at a woman with perfect nails and a face set to no, unless you spent the morning resetting it. I showed my ID, the key, the will. She peered at everything like the ink might confess to her. Every few seconds, she looked at me with a practiced pity that made my stomach tighten. After a while, she said she would have to call a manager. She said it like a threat. The manager came out in a gray suit that wanted a tailor and a tie that had never seen a knot his father didn't approve. He shook my hand carefully. Ms. Bennett, he said, I'm Mr. Hall. You're James Bennett's daughter? I am, I said. I have the key for box 74. Yes, he said. About that. There is a notation on the file that any access requires the presence of a second party. What party? I asked. My father is unavailable. A Mr. Isaac Taylor, he said, and a Ms. Teresa King as alternate. It's a safety measure. It's a headache, I said carefully. But fine. Call Ms. King. She'll be here in 20 minutes. He did. She was. She breezed into the bank past the chairs where men waited like plants and kissed the air near my cheek. Who needs me? She asked the room, and the room raised its hand. In the vault, the ceiling hung low and the carpet was the color of despair. Mr. Hall guided us to a narrow table and a small box. He stepped back a respectful distance, the way people do when they want to hear, but not be seen hearing. I opened the box. Inside was a leather folio and a brown paper package tied with twine like a lunch nobody wanted. There was also a photograph, a kind with scalloped edges. I pulled it out. My father stood with 2 other men in front of the ember room. One man wore a cap with the brim low. The other had a smile that reminded me of Rafi's only meaner. On the back, in my father's hand, Start Ash Wednesday. I undid the twine. The paper came apart in a satisfying crackle. Inside lay a slim ledger, unburned, and a metal flash drive taped to the back cover. The first page of the ledger was blank, except for one word stamped in red ink. Tithe. Risa leaned in. Lord, she whispered, he did it. Did what? I asked. Found a way to burn money so it made light, she said, eyes wet and fierce. Baby, you got a match in your hand. Back in the car, I held the flash drive like a tooth you can't stop tonguing. Mr. Hall had looked at it and looked away at a second that lasted a year. Risa rubbed circles on her knee, a habit she had when music hit her too hard. "You tell Norwood?" she asked. "I told the ceiling fan," I said. "I need a second before I let anyone else touch this." "You ain't got a second," she said. "You got men with clocks." She wasn't wrong. When I pulled up to the club, the front door was open. That was wrong. The door had a new lock, and I had closed it the way you snap a rib back into place. I parked crooked and ran. Inside, chairs had been flipped, a table was broken, and the stage lights had been dragged like someone had wanted to perform a song and decided to perform a warning instead. In the office, the desk drawers were out, the bins empty, the ashtray overturned like a dead insect. I turned again, and my foot hit something soft. I looked down. Isaac Taylor lay with his back against the filing cabinet, his hands clasped at his chest like prayer and blood dark seeping into the carpet. "Ike!" I dropped to my knees. He groaned, a good sound because it meant he was still here. "Girl," he wheezed. "They didn't get it. Tell Jimmy." His eyes focused, then lost me. "Tell him," I told him. "Tell who what?" I asked, pressing my scarf to his side with a blood wet warm. My phone was in my hand, and 911 was in my ear, and my heart was in my mouth. "Stay with me." "Ash Wednesday," he whispered. "Play the hymn backward." "What hymn?" I nearly shouted. The operator asked if I was safe. The siren of my own voice answered no. He tried to smile, and his lips split a little more. "All of them," he said. Then he passed out, leaving me hanging over him like a broken note. The paramedics came and moved with the clean purpose of people who solved what they could and left what they couldn't to God. One of them, a black woman with a no-nonsense braid, looked at me and said, "You, his daughter?" When I nodded, she said, "He's a tough old fool. He'll bark again." It sounded like hope. They carried Ike out. The police arrived and made shapes with their bodies in doorways and asked questions like they were filling a playbook. Detective Norwood arrived after the others were tired. He stood by the office door and absorbed everything. "You called me," he said, apropos of nothing except that it meant something. "I called 911, I said, bones shaking now that I was allowed. "You called me," he repeated, as if that decided something. "Good, that's a start." He crouched by the overturned ashtray and picked up a tiny smear of wax with his gloved finger. He held it up. "You changed the lock." "Yes." They changed everything else. He slipped the wax into a bag and looked at me. What did they not find? The weight of the flash drive in my pocket grew teeth. I looked at Norwood and thought about Rafi's smile and my father's letter and the paramedics' braid tight enough to live a hard day. I thought about Ash Wednesday stamped on the back of a photograph, about tithes, about playing hymns backward. I said, "They didn't find me." He almost smiled. "That's worth something," he said. "It's also dangerous. You going to tell me what Ash Wednesday is?" "If I knew," I said, "I would tell me first." He nodded because sometimes the best lies are temporarily true. "We're going to watch this door," he said. "And your door. And your other door, I don't know about yet." He rose. "And you're going to call me before you burn any more pages." "I didn't burn the first ones." He tilted his head. "Tell that to your coat." By the time the club was quiet again, Knight had stepped onto the stage without applause. I sat in the office chair and turned the flash drive over in my hand until it felt like a coin trick. The ledger waited, patient as a hymn. I opened to the second page. A list of song titles ran down the left margin. "Wade in the Water," "Nearer," "My God," "Swing Low, Sweet Chariot," with numbers next to each, then symbols, then dates. A code, a very Jimmy code. The page after that held names I recognized and names I didn't, businesses that weren't, churches that glimmered and drained, nonprofit shells that had fed concerts and fed men in equal measure. The last page was blank, except for a small cross in the corner. The ink was fresh. The line had lifted a strand of fiber from the paper. I plugged the flash drive into my laptop. A folder opened with a low mechanical inevitability. Inside, labeled simply, were recordings. No, not recordings. Tracks. Every file named for a hymn and a date. I pressed play on Wade in the Water, 03_01. The sound that filled my computer speakers was not a song. It was a voice in Spanish and a voice in English, trading numbers and places like cards. A launderer's communion. I shut the laptop like it could bite. My phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. Are you enjoying the music? I looked around the office as if I could find the camera in the air. I turned the phone face down, then laughed because that helped nothing. I texted back, hands steady again. I like a clean mix. The 3 dots pulsed. A minute later. Then you're going to hate what comes next. I closed my eyes. I pictured my mother's hands, the way they felt when she braided my hair too tight because she was afraid to lose me. I pictured my father's letter, a man writing his own smoke. I pictured Risa's eyes, and Ike bleeding, and Norwood's boots, and Tyler, Ross's smile, and the way Raffi had said matches like he was only curious what women burned. Then, somewhere beyond the closed lids, I heard it, the memory like a key turning. My father at the kitchen table, tapping his fork, saying, "Play a hymn forward, you get Sunday. Play it backward, you get Friday night." Everything sounds different when you're trying to get saved. I opened my eyes and wrote down every hymn title in the ledger, every number, every symbol. I wrote until the page wore grooves and my hand cramped. I didn't know what saved would mean this time. I only knew I wanted it, and I wanted to be the one who decided when the fire started and where it stopped. Outside, the green line screamed. The neon M flickered. The rest of the words stayed dark. The text came again at 4 a.m, when the city is a throat clearing and nothing more. Do you like riddles as much as your father did? I turned the phone over and watched the screen light paint the ceiling for a count of 10. My apartment hummed like an empty stage does, the kind of quiet that's learned how to attract trouble. I wrote down the number from the text on a legal pad. It wasn't a Chicago exchange. I powered the phone off and on so the world would know who was in charge, and then put it face down like that meant privacy. At 8, I called Risa and told her I wanted the keys to the piano at Ebenezer. She said, "Baby, I got keys to keys. Give me 20 and bring coffee." We met in the church basement, where the recreation hall smelled like floor wax and youth choir and bad spaghetti and love. Folding chairs were stacked against the wall like a flock at rest. The upright piano in the corner had a nubby black finish and a scar on the fallboard, where some kid had carved a heart around the word, J. Risa set 2 styrofoam cups on the top and cracked her knuckles like she was about to fight fair. "You going to tell me why I'm skipping my stories?" she asked, lifting the fallboard with her wrist like it might knock her back if she used her hand. I put the ledger on the music stand and opened it to the page of hymn titles and numbers. Ike said to play the hymn backward. "Lord, that fool," she said, but her voice softened on fool. "He means it like church and like not church. You got your laptop?" I set my computer on a folding table and plugged in a pair of small speakers from the church closet that had been donated by a man who had too much bass in his marriage. I opened the folder labeled Tithe and queued up Wade in the Water 03_01. "Before you hit play," Risa said, smoothing her headscarf like it was checking in with her, "you should know I don't speak Satan." "We're not speaking Satan," I said. "We're speaking Jimmy." "That's almost the same," she said, and smiled, so I knew we were still on the same team. I played the file forward first. A low hum, the clink of a glass, a voice in English reciting what sounded like inventory numbers. A man in Spanish repeated them like liturgy. At the 30-second mark, a door squealed. At the 50-second mark, somebody laughed. The ledger had a column next to each hymn with times like 031, 052, and then little symbols, crosses, fish, a tiny triangle I thought might be a delta. I wrote them on a post-it, then opened a basic audio editor and reversed the track. The room filled with nonsense that wanted to be language. The laugh turned into a gasp. The squeal became a sigh. The numbers in English smeared into breath. Underneath that, almost too low to hear, a whisper lifted and sank like a weight in water. "Listen," Risa said, eyes narrowed at nothing. "Deep under the mess." I pulled the low end up, cut the highs, nudged the volume just short of where it fuzzed. The whisper climbed out of the mud. Canaan storage, 318, back row, left, right. Canaan storage, ask for Henry. I stopped the file. The air shivered around us, as if someone had opened a freezer door. Risa put her palm flat on the piano lid. He layered it like a track. That man. Her eyes shone. He always loved hiding soup under grits. "We should go," I said. "If he put the list in the ledger and the whisper in the track, someone else can find it too." "And if we don't?" she said. "Then Raffi brings his version of sunrise." "I got some sunlight of my own," she said, and reached into her big purse to show me a thing that had started life as perfume and ended as pepper spray. "We bring the Lord in this and leave the rest to the cops if they feel like it." I texted Detective Norwood. "We think we found a location. Storage facility. I'll send address once we confirm." He replied with a bluntness I appreciated. "Send it now." "Let me earn my check." I typed Canaan storage, 75th and Kenwood. Unit 318. He didn't answer. I took that as a yes. We drove south in Risa's Cadillac that coughed like a man who'd made peace with his vices. The sky had decided not to snow again, and the world looked like the part of a movie where the hero gets a plan that is not yet a mistake. At 75th, Canaan storage rose out of the block, the way gentrification tries to do clean and cheerful, a building pretending it didn't know the rest of the street. The sign was newer than the neighbors, and the parking lot was so tidy it made me suspicious. "Biblical," Risa said. "Canaan means promise, right? Or trouble, depending on who you ask." Inside, the office had a bowl of complimentary peppermints and a receptionist who looked like she had hung the moon and wanted to take it down again at 5. Her name tag said Henry, which made me recalibrate. "Can I help you ladies?" Henry asked in a voice that lifted me several adjectives toward Mom. "We're here for Unit 318, I said, sliding my driver's license and the bank key across the counter because men named Henry like offerings. "We're authorized." He looked at my ID, then at the key, then at me. His face didn't change, which meant a lot changed. "I need to make a call," he said, and smiled like apology was a habit. He stepped into a back office and shut the door. Risa leaned in. "You see that door?" she whispered. It got ears. The wall between the office and the hallway was thin as a lie. We heard the muffle of Henry's voice, then another voice lower and flat. I couldn't make out words, but I didn't need to. I sent Norwood another text inside the office. "Manager is calling someone. Might be us, might be God. Norwood, stay put. Don't open anything without me." 2 minutes later, Henry came back with the cordial face of a man who had found the bottom of a bad coat of paint. "Of course," he said. "Here are your access cards. Unit 318 is down the last hall, left at the end, second row. Let me know if you need a dolly." "You got a truck?" Risa asked sweetly. "Depends what you're moving," he said. "Depends who's asking," she said, and we were back to being women who had grown up where language works harder than locks. We didn't take the elevator because the elevator was a trap and because Risa said her knees needed the prayer of the staircase. The hallway stretched long and cool, concrete floors and doors that rolled up into the ceiling like tongues. The further we went, the less the space smelled like peppermint, and the more it smelled like dust and oil in someone else's secrets. At 318, I used the brass safe deposit key first and felt the small click that meant the lock recognized a lover. Then I swiped the access card. The green light blinked once, then again. Risa stood with her shoulder angled toward the hall like a shield. "Ready?" I asked. "You asking or telling?" she asked. "Both." I pulled the garage handle up, slow to keep the rattle down. The unit was neat in the way of any room that someone cares about. Cardboard boxes labeled with a precise hand. A battered trombone case. A milk crate full of cassettes and a tape recorder that had given up on dignity. A metal locker with a combination lock. On top of that locker, a small Bible. Risa reached for the Bible the way a child reaches for home base. "He must have put this here when he still had thinking time," she said. She flipped it open and laughed once. "That man." Inside the cover, written in Jimmy's hand, "Play it backward. 10% first. The numbers you need are in the red letters." "The red letters are Jesus' speech," Risa said softly. "He's telling us to do math with the Lord's words. That's either brilliant or blasphemous. Maybe both," I said. "What's 10% first?" "Tithe," she said. "We take 10% of everything, give it to God, and then we make the rest work." Her finger traced the page. "He's saying start with the red. Count backwards 10, maybe? Or take every 10th word. The numbers in the ledger next to each hymn see? 0, 31, 0, 52, 31, 52. That look like verse numbers to you?" I flipped to a gospel where the red words ran long. Matthew, Luke, 31, 52. Depends on the chapter. Risa put the Bible down and went to the metal locker. The combination lock had 4 dials. I thought about left, right, from the whisper. Old school safe talk. Left 31. Left to 52. Right to something, I said. The ledger had a third number next to "Wade in the water," a small 12 with a triangle next to it. "Try 12, Risa said. I spun the lock left to 31, left again to 52, then right to 12. The lock released with a click that felt unreasonably moral. Inside, on the top shelf, sat a bank bag, the kind churches use when they're taking the Lord to the bank. The tag on it read Ember Tithe in that tidy hand. Beneath it, a stack of file folders with names. Wayman Family, Southside Arts Fund, Henderson Scholars. My stomach took a step, and my head followed. "Henderson?" I breathed. "As in the charter network?" "Lord," Risa said. "He tithed to them, or from them." I opened the Henderson folder. It held copies of checks donations from shell corporations with names that meant nothing, but had addresses 3 floors up from law offices downtown. Endorsements on the back ran through a regional credit union that had a branch in a church basement. There were ledger pages that showed money entering a gifts account and leaving for programmatic outreach, with quotes around it like the words were trying not to be caught. I keyed my phone, took photos. My chest felt tight and planned. Images of kids in blazers and ties, rose uninvited, the kind of optics Tyler would fry an egg on. My case file on the Henderson Motion sat on my desk at the firm like a polite bum. On the second shelf, under a coil of mic cables, lay a small hard drive, a stack of deposit envelopes fat with cash, binders labeled SH, 1 through SH, 3, and an envelope marked Norwood. You get used to making choices by the temperature of the room. I pocketed the envelope for Norwood and left the bank bag where it lay. I slipped the hard drive into the bottom of my tote under a church fan that said, "Jesus saves because I am my Father's daughter," And I like my irony clothes. Take some cash, Risa said, watching me think. Not because it's yours. Because the men who think it's theirs will come for what they can see. Leave them something to wonder about. A box without the heart makes men stupid. I shoved 4 deposit envelopes into my tote and winced at the weight. We're walking bait, I said. Been worse, she said. Footsteps in the hall froze the air. The cadence was the expensive kind men who didn't need to hurry. A heel planted full, echo that suggested the hallway belonged to their father's taxes. Risa's eyes met mine, then flicked up toward the corrugated metal ceiling, where light bled through from the neon behind the office. Close it, she whispered. But not all the way. I pulled the locker door most of the way shut and left the lock hanging open like we were careless. Then I pulled the unit's roll-up door down to knee height, and we crouched. In the slot between the floor and the door, I saw the toes of 2 pairs of shoes stop in front of 318. One laced black, one brown and smug. The brown tapped twice on the metal. I don't like when people rush, a voice said through the door, amused. Raffi. I swallowed a curse before it became air. He squatted, face appearing in the gap like a coin performing a trick. His smile was bright and belonged on a man who sold brunch, not bullets. He tilted his head to see better. Ms. Bennett, he said, as if we had met at a gallery opening instead of 2 inches from guilt. Teresa. Always a pleasure. You interested in a storage unit? Risa asked. We're thinking of redecorating. Storage is for people who plan to leave, Raffi said. He tapped the door with his ring. May I? Not yet, I said. It's messy, and I'm allergic to help. Everyone is, he said. He stood, and the gap filled with his legs. We can do this dance 2 ways. You open the door, and we look together, like civilized people who know how to share. Or I call Henry to get the key he keeps in a fake coffee can, and we look at the same thing with less music. I felt Risa's hand on my sleeve, a small pressure. I breathed once, then lifted the door in a smooth move that said I wasn't afraid. I was. I let the fear make my face honest in a way he could misread. Raffi stepped in with a companion taller, younger, a face you'd forget if he didn't want you to. The younger man scanned the unit, eyes snagging on little things like 2 clean edges and the way dust lies. Raffi stopped at the metal locker and smiled at the open lock like he had just found a child's tooth. Curious, he said gently. What did you think Ash Wednesday was, Miss Bennett? A holiday, I said. Some people use it to start over. Some people use it to cover what they did the night before. He laughed. The younger man didn't. I like you, Raffi said. You talk like a lawyer and a daughter. He lifted the bank bag a fraction, peeked, set it back. He touched nothing else. He looked at the folder named Henderson, and his mouth did something interesting, the way a man's mouth does when a game reveals a new board. You should be careful. That's my brand, I said. I mean careful about being righteous, he said. Righteous people bleed more. You set Ash Wednesday in motion. You won't like who comes to church. Everyone tithes when forced. We prefer our gifts voluntary. Gifts, I said, and handed him the word like it was a blade with a glove on. He put his hand in his coat, and for a second my vision narrowed to a pinpoint. He pulled out a white cigarette with a little red saint stamped near the filter, and I almost laughed because it was too perfectly on the nose. Santa Muerte. His companion lit it for him with a small, tidy flame. He blew smoke toward the ceiling, where it disappeared into the grooves. May I? He asked, already smoking. Who am I to tell a man how to die? Risa said, and the boy with him flinched because he was not old enough in his spirit for a woman like her. Raffi flicked his ash into his palm, letting it cool there. Keep the box neat, he said. Call me when you decide. There are men worse ones than me, who like to push. I like to nudge. You shot Ike, I said, because the guilt wanted a face, or had him shot. He shook his head as if I'd disappointed him in class. "We don't shoot uncles at the door," he said. "We don't make messes unless the art demands it." He nodded at the folder again. The name Henderson looked heavy on the paper. "If you want to hurt me, that's a beginning. If you want to hurt yourself, that's a masterpiece." When they left, the hallway's quiet returned in a rush that made my ears ring. I lowered the door and leaned my forehead against the metal, then laughed because there is nothing else to do after you don't die. "We done?" Risa asked. "We're never done," I said. "But for now, yes." Back in the car, I opened the envelope marked Norwood. Inside were copies of driver's licenses, DBA filings, and a list of names with a title at the top, Tithe Riders. Next to each name, a note. Pays choir director cash. Runs night kitchen to wash tips. Board member, Henderson Schultz Foundation. Collects envelopes after gala. There were also photos. A city inspector shaking hands with someone smiling too hard. A woman in a power suit standing next to a man whose eyes were familiar because I'd seen them in the mirror my whole life. My father's eyes. Her name tag read, Shrina York, Chief Operating Officer, Henderson Charter Schools. I didn't know her. I would. Norwood met us at the 3rd District. 35th and Michigan had the perpetually tired energy of men who hold radios like talismans. He took us into an interview room that had been painted and repainted so many times it had developed a texture you could grate cheese on. "You didn't open the box without me," he said, which was both question and compliment. "Define open," I said, and slid the envelope toward him. "Found this for you, in a locker my father made." He glanced at the top page, then at me. "You know how to make a cop happy." "You should see my Christmas list," I said. "Takes years off men." He leafed through the names with a face that didn't move. "These are our friends," he said, as if reciting a bedtime story. "This one signs off on code violations we need. This one lets us park in front of the hydrant if we're only running in. This one is a deacon on Sunday, and on Tuesday he collects cash from fry cook registers for charity." His finger paused on the Henderson name. "And this one runs a school network that keeps its hands clean because children are excellent soap." "How bad?" I asked, because the word bad still meant the thing your mother measured with a wrist. "On a scale from the dishwasher stole $20 to the alderman sold 3 wards?" He said, "A firm in the Loop set up donor-advised funds and shell corporations to move money from brown hands to white checks. Somebody figured out a way to make tithe mean tax break." "My firm?" I asked, too fast. The room leaned toward me. "Not yours," he said. "Yours is bad in other ways. This one is Singleton Reed, but men sit next to men at charity lunches, and ideas walk between chairs." He tapped the photo of Trina York. "You met her?" "No," I said, and swallowed how much I suddenly wanted to. He slid the Sonam workbot he bagged from the ember in front of me and smiled a little. "Your sunrise friend smokes these?" "He wants me to think he doesn't care if his mouth tastes like funerals," I said. "They burned Ike from the side, not the front." "Man knew where arteries sleep," he said, and lifted a shoulder in apology for the blood that comes with his job. "Your father's ledger, don't send it to me." "Not yet. Take pictures. Keep it clean. The USB you found, don't plug it into anything that touches the internet. Find a machine you'd be willing to murder later." "You're assuming I don't murder machines daily," I said. He smiled properly then. It looked like it hurt a little, as if the muscle had been on leave. "Ms. Bennett, whatever Ash Wednesday is, it's pissing off a lot of men who like their lines straight. That makes me like it. It also makes me want to put a vest on you." "I don't look good in vests," I said. "They mess with my silhouette." "You look like someone who's going to make trouble," he said, standing. "Try to do it where my badge can find you." At the firm, the day slid back on like an ill-fitting coat. Tyler had left a post-it on my desk in his neat sociopathic handwriting. Media asks about Henderson. Not you. Let comms handle. Also, can you pull the donor list into a spreadsheet? Want to see who's writing checks. I stared at the word donor until it grew teeth. I thought of the folder in my tote and felt bile nudge my throat. Hey, a voice said from the doorway. It was Liv, another associate who'd started the same year I did, and who had the kind of smile you learn when you have to be the only black woman in 5 rooms in one day. She stepped in and closed the door with a hip. You okay? I look worse than I feel, I said. Kelvin's docket give you hell? Always, she said, and then her face eased because we were alone. Tyler asked me to pull the Henderson donor list an hour ago. I told him it wasn't my case. He said it was your case, and I said also not mine. He used the word optics twice, and then told me I was being uncollegial. Optics, I said, the syllables metallic on my tongue, means we go to the school board and smile while they eat us, she said. Want me to help with anything? Or want me to not be seen with you because you're radioactive? You ever want to go in-house? I asked. Lord, she said, grinning. You asking me on a date? Just thinking about exit plans, I said, and she saw something in my face that made her sit down. What happened? She said, and lie pretty if you have to. Pretty lies are above my pay grade, I said. I told her the pieces I could tell without setting the room on fire, skipping the part where Rafi's cigarette ash drew a straight line up my spine. If the Henderson Foundation is washing money, the kids aren't guilty, but the board knows where the checks sleep. Liv's mouth thinned. I'll pull the public filings, she said. Not for comms, for us. I'll do it at lunch, so it looks like I'm hungry. You are hungry, I said. For the right kind of trouble, she said. At noon, Tyler leaned on my door again. How's our motion? He asked, as if all motion was the same motion, a thing you flip into a court with the right adjectives and a good font. On schedule, I said. My hand rested on a file, so I could look busy. Media asked again, he said. I told them we were proud to be representing a school system dedicated to children. That good? If you like cliches, I said. He laughed, missing the part where I wasn't joking. You look tired, Maya, he said, and it wasn't concern. It was an evaluation of shelf life. If this is too much with the club and your father and all, I can put Dev on the motion. Optics will survive. Optics always do, I said. I'm fine. A tag. He stopped himself, grinned, made a show of growing. Atta woman. When he left, I closed my door and counted to 10 so I wouldn't throw something. Then I pulled up the Illinois Charitable Trust filings and searched the Henderson Scholars Foundation. In 3 years, donations had doubled, then tripled, then plateaued at a number that would put a street of kids through college twice. The list of donors included names that sounded like furniture stores and bonds from the 1940s. A few had addresses 1 floor down from Singleton Reed. I texted Amir. You still free tonight? He replied fast. For you, yes. You want dinner or a felony? Both, I whispered into the empty office and smiled for the first time in 2 days. We met at a diner near the university, the kind of place where the coffee is punishing and the pancakes are absolutely worth it. He slid into the booth with his bat-shouldered swagger and looked at my face like he was bracing for weather. You look like a courtroom and a confession, he said. I found Henderson in my father's files, I said, skipping the appetizers. Their foundation is a pipe. Sunrise is pouring money through a choir director fund into a program called Outreach. It comes out clean enough to hang on a wall. He shook his head. That tracks. The day they landed their 3rd campus, they hired Fox and Gray to handle their compliance. The board chair is a donor to 3 aldermanic campaigns and a whisperer to a judge I can't move. You sure you want to be seen with me? I asked. I'm toxic. I like dangerous, he said softly. And I like you. He leaned back. What's Ash Wednesday? A lever, I said. Tithe. 10% of every dirty dollar set aside in a separate fund. If someone flips the switch, it diverts not to sunrise mouths, but to places that can't give it back. Bail funds. Food banks. Maybe it was already doing that slowly. Maybe he built a kill switch. Play the hymn backward, he said, nodding. Reverse the flow. Exactly, I said, but there's a cost. Men come to church with knives. You'll need a shield, he said. Norwood's a shield. Liv is a shield. I'm a shield. Raffi is a blade, I said. We got those too, he said, and his eyes sharpened the way they do when he's about to cross a line in court on purpose. Let me talk to a guy at Singleton Reed, not on the record. See if their numbers stink. Careful, I said. Always, he said, and lifted his coffee. To bad ideas done right. On the way out, a woman at the counter gave me a look the way some women do when they're holding a story you're inside of. You Jimmy's girl? She asked. I am, I said, instinctively straightening. He played my cousin's wake, she said. He made the day hurt better. She handed me a receipt with a phone number scribbled on it. If you need someone to say a thing nobody wants to say, call me. Back at the club, the M in the neon had died for good, leaving bare room blinking like an unfinished sentence. The door had new scratches near the lock. Either my lock had fought, or someone had wanted me to know they'd tried. I stepped inside, and the gut feeling that had kept me alive this long whispered not alone. Miss Bennett, a voice said from the dark. Not Raffi's, not Norwood's, something rougher like gravel in a throat. I flicked the lights on. A man stood near the stage thick in the way of a man who loves a heavy bag, southeast side hat pulled low. He held his hands out from his body, palms forward. Who are you? I asked. Name is Mercer, he said. I run night kitchen on 63rd. Your father owed me eggs and rent. Take a number, I said. He smiled without showing teeth. He also saved my boy from a charge by calling a cop who owed him a song. So I'm here paying a tithe. What kind of tithe? I said, because language is a test you survive. The kind where I tell you this place is hot, he said. Sunrise wants the flash, not the ledger. The ledger is theater. The flash is the play. He tilted his head toward the office, as if he could see through walls. Don't keep it where you think it's clever. They know where clever lives. Where should I keep it? I asked, because sometimes you take advice from the man who knows how the ovens work. In my freezer, he said. End of the rack, behind the bag labeled carrots. They won't look in a poor man's cold. You expect me to leave my father's work in a restaurant on 63rd, I said. I expect you to not die, he said. Also, you should know your bank manager is a hymn sung out of key. He called sunrise when you showed him your key. He used the phrase out of band verification, like he thought it made him pretty. That tracks, I said, and felt my cheeks heat with the kind of anger that requires new vocabulary. He looked at me then the way someone looks at an animal they can't tell is wounded or mad. I'm not here to be your friend, he said. I'm here because a man who once made music for my dead told me I would leave this world faster if I didn't learn when to bend. You knew my father? I asked, unable to stop the whine of 13 in my voice. He knew everybody, Mercer said. He turned to go. Night kitchen closes at 2. Freezers open from 2:05 to 2:20. Bring gloves. When he was gone, I sat on the edge of the stage and let myself feel the whiplash. Then I stood. Feelings got you killed. Action got you tired. At home, I pulled an old laptop out of a box in my closet, the one my firm gave me my first year that still thought the internet was a suggestion. I wiped it, took it off Wi-Fi, covered the camera with electrical tape because television had taught me caution. I plugged the flash drive in and watched the files populate like a choir taking their places. Each track, reversed, had a whisper. Each whisper held a location and a note. Zion Roadhouse Sunday, 12. Bethany Storage Replace Lock. Sinai Credit Union Ask for Gina. Between the Christian names, a secular name kept returning like a chorus. Henderson Scholars Gifts 341. Talk to Trina. Use red letters. Tithe at drop. The last track. Nearer My God 02_26. When reversed, held no numbers. It held a sentence in my father's voice. I knew his voice, not because I'd heard it every day. I knew it because it had lived in the spaces between days. Baby girl, if you got this far, he said, and my throat closed. Play that simple hymn you hate on the piano. Now make it a bad thing? That turns it into a map. Don't trust the man with a crooked nose and a straight tie. Don't trust the woman who smiles when she's losing. Trust the one who doesn't speak until the third beat. I started to cry then, not because of the advice, but because of the way he said baby girl, like it was a key itself. I wiped my face and pressed the heel of my hand to my sternum, as if the bone could be persuaded to behave. My phone lit up with a news alert. A second later, because the world didn't owe me my grief. Henderson Scholars had announced a gala fundraiser to open their next campus. Co-chaired by Trina York and the board chair who liked judging and lunches. Special guest, Tyler's favorite alderman. Platinum sponsor, Singleton Reed. I texted Liv. You see this? I did. I also found something under their 990 that looks like a river. Call in 5? We talked with the cautious happiness of two women who might have a fuse to pull. She'd traced Gifts 341 to a donor-advised fund administered by a financial services company that specialized in making money change outfits. They're using Gifts 341 as a sink, she said. Money goes in from 5 different LLCs and 3 nonprofits, sits for a week, then drips into outreach. You can write a novel about the word outreach. None of the money goes through the district or the board. Private funds, no oversight. Who are you? I asked. Name is Mercer, he said. I run Night Kitchen on 63rd. Your father owed me eggs and rent. Take a number, I said. He smiled without showing teeth. He also saved my boy from a charge by calling a cop who owed him a song. So I'm here paying a tithe. What kind of tithe? I said, because language is a test you survive. The kind where I tell you this place is hot, he said. Sunrise wants the flash, not the ledger. The ledger is theater. The flash is the play. He tilted his head toward the office, as if he could see through walls. Don't keep it where you think it's clever. They know where clever lives. Where should I keep it? I asked, because sometimes you take advice from the man who knows how the ovens work. In my freezer, he said. End of the rack, behind the bag labeled carrots. They won't look in a poor man's cold. You expect me to leave my father's work in a restaurant on 63rd, I said. I expect you to not die, he said. Also, you should know your bank manager is a hymn sung out of key. He called sunrise when you showed him your key. He used the phrase out of band verification, like he thought it made him pretty. That tracks, I said, and felt my cheeks heat with the kind of anger that requires new vocabulary. He looked at me then the way someone looks at an animal they can't tell is wounded or mad. I'm not here to be your friend, he said. I'm here because a man who once made music for my dead told me I would leave this world faster if I didn't learn when to bend. You knew my father? I asked, unable to stop the whine of 13 in my voice. He knew everybody, Mercer said. He turned to go. Night Kitchen closes at 2. Freezers open from 2:05 to 2:20. Bring gloves. When he was gone, I sat on the edge of the stage and let myself feel the whiplash. Then I stood. Feelings got you killed. Action got you tired. At home, I pulled an old laptop out of a box in my closet, the one my firm gave me my first year that still thought the internet was a suggestion. I wiped it, took it off Wi-Fi, covered the camera with electrical tape because television had taught me caution. I plugged the flash drive in and watched the files populate like a choir taking their places. Each track, reversed, had a whisper. Each whisper held a location and a note. Zion Roadhouse Sunday 12. Bethany Storage Replace Lock. Sinai Credit Union Ask for Gina. Between the Christian names, a secular name kept returning like a chorus. Henderson Scholars Gifts 341. Talk to Trina. Use red letters. Tithe at drop. The last track. Nearer My God 02_26. When reversed, held no numbers. It held a sentence in my father's voice. I knew his voice, not because I'd heard it every day. I knew it because it had lived in the spaces between days. Baby girl, if you got this far, he said, and my throat closed. Play that simple hymn you hate on the piano. Now make it a bad thing? That turns it into a map. Don't trust the man with a crooked nose and a straight tie. Don't trust the woman who smiles when she's losing. Trust the one who doesn't speak until the third beat. I started to cry then, not because of the advice, but because of the way he said baby girl, like it was a key itself. I wiped my face and pressed the heel of my hand to my sternum, as if the bone could be persuaded to behave. My phone lit up with a news alert, a second later, because the world didn't owe me my grief. Henderson Scholars had announced a gala fundraiser to open their next campus, co-chaired by Trina York and the board chair who liked judging and lunches. Special guest, Tyler's favorite alderman. Platinum sponsor, Singleton Reed. I texted Liv. You see this? I did. I also found something under their 990 that looks like a river. Call in 5? We talked with the cautious happiness of two women who might have a fuse to pull. She'd traced Gifts 341 to a donor-advised fund administered by a financial services company that specialized in making money change outfits. They're using Gifts 341 as a sink, she said. Money goes in from 5 different LLCs and 3 nonprofits, sits for a week, then drips into outreach. You can write a novel about the word outreach. None of the money goes through the district or the board. Private funds, no oversight. Then you're going to need another door, he said. Back door, side door, cooler door, bring friends. When I got back to my apartment, the door was closed and the curtain folded the way I liked. The bathroom mirror was clean. The room felt like it had been airing itself out for me. I put my tote down and turned on the kettle. The quiet rose. My phone vibrated face down. You dropped something. I stared at the screen until the letters stopped being letters. I typed, "Come pick it up." 3 dots. Then, "Be careful what you invite in." I set the phone gently on the table, as if sudden moves could trigger men. I poured water over a tea bag and thought about a piano in a church basement and a folder labeled Henderson and my father's voice telling me to make Sunday sound like Friday. I thought about what it means to play backward, how you have to know the song forward first. I opened the ledger. I put my finger on Wade in the water and counted 10 words backward in the red letters of John. I wrote down the word I landed on. Go. I did it again, too. Again, river. I put them together and felt foolish until I didn't. I took a map out of a drawer, an actual paper map, because my father had kept them, and sometimes paper is smarter than your phone. I traced the river south from the loop, past Chinatown, past Bridgeport, past the place where the water forgets who it's supposed to serve. There, where the back channels knit like tangled hair, sat a notation from some long-ago city worker. Ashland Turning Basin. I wrote it down in pretended coincidence wasn't a character in my life. I threw a coat over my hoodie and headed for the door the way people do when they know it's a bad idea and need to do it before sense catches them. On the landing, my neighbor Mrs. Covington cracked her door and stared at me like I was a TV show. "You going out at this hour?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "You need a hat," she said, and handed me one knit from yarn the color of mustard. "A head will make you stupid if you let it get cold." "Thank you," I said, and put it on because she had raised 3 boys to adulthood and age outranks sense. The turning basin at night is a place where you think about all the things a river carries that you can't see. The wind off the water tasted like iron and old promises. The fence had been cut in a clean square and then bent back into place. Someone had been here who knew their geometry. I slid through. The bank was a mix of mud and junk and edges. I walked along the water, counting the way a person counts when they're not sure what they're looking for, but know they'll know it. At the far end, half under a collapsed pallet, I saw at the corner of a plastic container with a blue lid, taped with the same painter's tape from the bank. On the tape, a symbol, a tiny triangle. The last number in the ledger next to "Wade in the water." I pulled the container free and dropped to my knees because the mud had decided we were friends now. Inside, double-bagged, was a phone in a waterproof case and a short note. "Don't use on your network. Dial choir. Hang up on 3. I wiped the phone on my sleeve and stared at it until it felt like a snake I could charm. Then I pressed choir and held it to my ear. 1 ring, 2. At 3, I hung up. My phone vibrated in my coat pocket. Unknown number. I answered. "Miss Bennett," a woman's voice said, smooth as the edge of paper. "You're late." "For what?" I asked. "For practice," she said. "Don't be late again." The line went dead, and somewhere behind me on the path, a footstep slid in gravel. I turned, heat shooting up my spine, eyes leaping to the shapes the dark makes. A man stepped out of the cut fence, small, quick, face hidden in a hood. He froze when he saw me seeing him, and then bolted. I chased, because that is what my bad ideas wear to the dance. He was faster, and the mud loved him more. At the parking lot, my breath got loud, and my smart shoes decided they had applied for other jobs. He looked over his shoulder once, and I saw his nose crooked just enough, and his tie straight even under the hoodie, and I thought, there you are. I lost him at Loomis. He darted into a narrow walkway between 2 fenced lots and disappeared like pride in a hearing. I leaned against a wall and laughed because my body needed something that wasn't a scream. Back home, I stripped mud in the bathtub like a layer I didn't need. I lay on the floor in the towel and stared at the ceiling and thought about the word, practice, choir, late. I set 3 alarms for 3 different times and slept for exactly enough minutes to dream. My father was playing a hymn backward while my mother braided my hair too tight for me to hear. In the morning, news of the gala had grown legs and opinions. Henderson's board was on television making noises about holistic transformation and community partnerships. The alderman smiled like a man who had taken 2 ibuprofen and called it a platform. In the crawl, a smaller headline, "Local club owner's assault under investigation." A picture of me outside the Ember, hair half wild, eyes doing a dance that said don't. Tyler emailed, "Need you camera ready for possible statements Friday. Talking points attached. Please stick to message. Don't go rogue. LOL." Liv texted, "I found something in Trina's LinkedIn. She used to run operations at a nonprofit called Bethany Youth. Guess who their accountant was? I. Singleton Reed? She. Bingo. Also, guess where their records are stored? Bethany Storage. There's only one in the city, on 76th. I stared at the word Bethany, and my heart beat in time with the ledger. The hymn list in my father's book was a map, and the map had less to do with God than I'd like, and more to do with what men decide to mean when they say worship. I packed the Bible, the ledger, my father's letter, and an extra hat. I put the plastic phone in my pocket. I locked my door, then unlocked it and checked my stove, because grief makes you forget the stove. then locked it again. On the steps, Mrs. Covington cracked her door. "You want a scarf?" she asked. "I'll take all the armor you got," I said. As I reached the sidewalk, a car idled across the street, a modest sedan, the color of compromise, the window wind down. Rafi leaned across the passenger seat, arm draped over the rest, like he'd learned how to recline as a subject in a painting. "Going somewhere?" he asked. "Always," I said. "Let me give you a ride," he said. "I know where you're headed." "Then you know I can walk," I said. "Walking is brave," he said. "Cars are practical." "Who said I was practical?" I asked. He laughed. "Call me before you make me a villain," he said. "It's hard to get the stains out." "You came pre-stained," I said, and stepped off the curb. He watched me go, smile in place, like a man who had invented patience because he needed more time lives. Bethany Storage sat 2 blocks off, 76th, with a sign that had peeled and been repainted and had a small halo of graffiti behind the white. Inside, the hallways were the same indifferent white as Canaan, but colder, like here the cameras worked. The clerk wore a hoodie and a look. "We don't rent new units this week," he said, before I'd opened my mouth. "System upgrade." "I have an old one," I said. "Inherited? You like that word?" "I like rent," he said. "You got both keys?" "Yes," I lied, because sometimes you save the truth for when it matters more. "Unit number?" "The one you're about to tell me," he said. "Bethany," I said, because a fool plays the game she knows, and I was choosing to be a different fool today. He blinked, then smiled despite himself. He slid a logbook my way and tapped a line with his nail. The signature was my father's. "Unit, 4 to 12. You his?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "I'm his." "You got his look when you say that," he said. "Like a man who owes you interest." "I'll collect when I can," I said. The unit door opened with a sigh that felt like a warm-up. Inside, the air smelled like old suitcases and the plastic of raincoats. There were photos in milk crates, a stack of flyers for shows that never happened, a crate of church fans, and a cardboard file box labeled in Jimmy's print. A SH4 beneath it. Another, marked choir. I opened choir. Inside were headshots and names of choir directors in half the city, with notes like "won't touch cash," "husband has temper," "believes in the cause," "doesn't know what the cause is." At the bottom, a smaller envelope labeled with a name I knew, Reverend White. I held it up like evidence and like a prayer. ASH4 held what the others probably held: wire, diagrams, bank names, times, places. But at the very bottom lay a Polaroid curled at the edges. 3 men on the Ember stage 20 years ago. One was my father, looking like a story he'd tell later. One was a man I didn't know. The third had a crooked nose and a tie that could have held up a bridge. The back of the Polaroid had one word in red: start. I turned the picture over again and held it in both hands until my palm warmed it and the image sharpened. The man with the nose was standing with his hips angled like he'd been born to watch people leave. He wore a small pin on his lapel, an open book. The Henderson logo. When the alarm on my phone chirped a choir tone, the joke not lost on me, I jumped. 3 p.m., my phone buzzed again with a text from the plastic phone, the choir line. "Practice, don't be late." I packed the files, closed the unit, told the clerk thank you in a voice that implied I'd asked for less than the world, and walked out into a gray that had finally decided to let go snow after all. On the drive back west, Rafi's sedan shadowed me for 3 blocks and then turned off, either bored or patient, and I couldn't tell which was worse. Norwood called as I pulled up to the light at Cottage Grove. "You stirring?" he asked. "I'm a spoon," I said. "I found pictures." "And?" he said. "And I'm looking at a nose that's been in my way since I took the bar," I said. "Board chair. Henderson." He was on stage with my father, 20 years too late for anything but a bad idea. Norwood cursed softly. "You ready to pick a side?" he asked. "I picked it when I unlocked the box," I said. "Then get ready to bleed a little," he said. "Practice is at 5? 3, I said. They moved me up an hour. "I guess my scales impress." "You want a tail?" he asked. "One with a badge?" "I got one with a halo," I said, glancing in the rear view where nobody sat. "Meet me at Ebenezer at 4. Bring gloves. And a vest for your sense of humor." He laughed even though nothing was funny. "You playing the hymn backward?" he asked. "I've been playing the hymn backward my whole life," I said. "I just didn't know the song." The choir at Ebenezer did not rehearse at 5 anymore. They gathered at 4:45, as if the extra 15 minutes could keep the devil polite. Risa propped the basement door with a milk crate and waved me down the steps with 2 fingers, and a look that meant no foolishness. Norwood was there in a Cubs cap pulled down, so far he looked like a man trying to hide from a mirror. He tipped the bill without taking it off. "You sure this is your practice?" he asked. "Pretty sure," I said, which meant I wasn't. Folding chairs formed a crooked semicircle. A handful of people sat with their coats still on, the way folks do when they aren't yet sure the room is theirs. A bald man with a choir pin on his lapel. A woman in scrubs with a West Pullman Praise Team hoodie. A teenager with a soprano's posture and a scar that made her chin look determined. A deacon from another church I recognized by his pocket square. They all looked at me like I was a guest preacher, and they were waiting to see if I knew the text. Risa clapped once. "Jimmy's girl," she said, like an introduction and a dare. The people in the chairs looked at one another in the kind of silence that has weight. Then the door at the far end opened, and a woman walked in with a file folder hugged to her chest and a face, like a wall that has learned to be a door when the right person knocks. She stood in front of us and let the noise of the room fold itself away. She didn't speak until the 3rd beat of the quiet. "Miss Bennett," she said finally, "you're late." A voice from the river phone. Smooth paper. Clipped on the edges. Shrina York. "Practice moved up," I said, masking the shock like a solo. "You run choir?" Her mouth tilted like I had told a decent joke at the wrong time. "I run a lot of things," she said. "When men leave holes, somebody has to lay the carpet." Norwood's fists shifted in his jacket pockets. He didn't take his cap off. He didn't need to be introduced. Trina glanced at him once, let him exist, and returned to me. "You called choir," she said. "That line doesn't ring unless you already know the melody. Jimmy made it that way." "You knew my father," I said. The sentence held more blades than I planned. "We worked together," she said, the words careful. Work is an honest word. It makes sure love doesn't try to get credit. "Which work?" I asked, because I carried a ledger now as much as a heart. "The kind that puts money quietly where it should have been loud," she said. 10% to ashes. Ashes to light. One day, more than 10. Her eyes didn't blink, but the muscles near them moved like they were tired. "He came to me at Henderson before I got the job with the title. He said, 'You're smart. You believe in kids. You also know the board will use them for soap.' I told him not if I could help it. He said, 'Help it with tithes.'" Norwood's breath changed. "Then you set up gifts 341. Singleton Reed set up gifts 341, she said dryly. "I signed documents they swore would keep us clean as a bandage. I also signed a dozen that let 10% bleed away to the right places." I thought I was clever. Then clever learned a new word. The board chair learned about sunrise and thought it was benevolence with teeth. The chair's nose broke in college. He wore a tie straight ever since, like a religion. You've seen his face. He likes cameras. "Whitaker Sloan," I said, tasting the name like a pill. Hearing it out loud made the room colder. He was on the Ember stage with my father. He loved jazz when a black man was holding it for him, she said. He also loves power that doesn't look messy on paper. And Sunrise? I asked. Started as couriers and turned into a muscle that carried briefcases, she said. Rafi is smart. Worse men hid behind him when they realized smart is better than loud. She lifted her chin. You think I like him? I like the way he keeps blood off children. That's not liking. That's math. Risa crossed herself like she had when my father's casket slid from the church. All right then, she said. We gonna sing or stand here and debate music theory? I opened the ledger. The hymn list gleamed like map lines. The envelope marked Norwood in my tote had already made its way to Norwood's pocket. He had read it with a face like a wall, built from patience and names. He watched Trina and me like a man measuring a bridge he needed to trust with his life. How does Ash Wednesday last drop work? I asked, seizing the tremor in my throat. Trina set the folder on the upright's music stand and opened it. Forms, names, a schedule printed in red, where black would have soothed. Ash window, 21 o'clock to 21:15. She tapped it with her nail. Tonight, 15 minutes where the pipes bend. Your father built an algorithm with a choir director from Evanston, who used to be a programmer before he found Jesus in a bass line. The code waits for 3 signals. One from the choir line, one from an internal Henderson system I can still access if I move fast, and one from sound. Sound, I said. My father's voice walked across my memory like a man coming into a kitchen late. Play that simple hymn you hate. Now make it a bad thing. Play it backward, Trina said. Nearer, my God, to thee. At the gala. In the room where the board will be taking photos with children. You want me to get arrested in sequence? I said. I want you to be your father's child and my partner, she said, not bothering to make it pretty. I can send the internal ping. The choir line can send the river signal. We need a microphone to feed sound into the algorithm in the same window as the other 2. The band starts at 9. Ash window closes at 9:15. After that, the pipeline reverts and men keep their soup. What happens if we pull it? Norwood asked. His voice got quiet in an interesting way, like a man about to step on a thin lake. 10% becomes 100 for one cycle, Trina said. Everything in gifts, 341 in outreach in that window, diverts to accounts the board can't pull back. Bail funds, food banks, legal aid, the ash burns clean. And the worst men? Risa asked. They come to church with knives, Trina said, not flinching. I thought of Rafi in the storage hall, ash cooling in his palm. I thought of Whitaker Sloane's profile like a staple. I thought of the album of kids' faces in Henderson brochures, and of my case file at the firm like a dog waiting for a whistle. I thought of my mother's hands, and of the kitchen sacks, rubber band, and prayers. Let's sing, I said. We mapped it fast, because fast was all we had. Norwood texted a name, and 10 minutes later 2 more detectives. I didn't know by face, but recognized by posture stood by the basement door. No raid jackets, no swagger. Just men who had been told to catch rather than crush. Amir showed up because I texted him 3 words. Bring your vest, and he showed up because he is a man who listens even when he is mad at himself for it. Live slid in the side door at 5:30 with a scarf and her laptop and sat on a chair like a college student who had wandered into the wrong seminar and decided to graduate early. You're leaving the firm after this, I told her. I left when Tyler said optics for the 3rd time, she replied. What's the assignment? Watch the wire transfers in real time if you can. Don't touch the line if it shocks you. I like shock, she said. It tells you you're alive. At 6, Risa handed me coffee that tasted like fear and love. Trina signed into a back-end Henderson portal with fingers that barely shook. She put her phone on airplane mode, then off, then on. She scowled at a security prompt, like it was a toddler acting up in aisle 5. "You get one shot at this," she said, not to me. At 7, an email from Tyler landed in my inbox with a ping that felt like an insult. Media prep. Talking points attached. "Please remember, we don't indict motives. We honor students." Smile. He had CCD 2 partners who liked me because I didn't cost them sleep. I typed 3 words. "I resign," effective. Then I deleted the last word and replaced it with Friday because I am petty but professional. I hit send and turned the phone off. Liv leaned over to fist bump me without looking away from her screen. At 8:30, we walked into a hotel ballroom that had decided to pretend it loved children. Banners with words like transform and future and excellence hung from trusses that had been built by men who would never be invited inside. A jazz quartet wore suits too tight for their instruments and smiled at donors who loved recognizing standards. The bar made a small fortune selling optimism in crystal. Raffi watched me from by the silent auction, where experiences no one in Bronzeville would ever have the time for were written in gold script. He didn't approach. He lifted his glass half an inch, a toast to my inevitability, and turned away to speak to a man whose donation check could have put a clinic on 3 corners. The Henderson board clustered near the stage, teeth white, ties law-abiding. Whitaker Sloane's nose hooked in profile, like a punctuation mark that had once belonged to a fight. His tie was straight enough to slice air. When his eyes touched me, they kept going. The microaggression was the size of a room, the kind where a black woman in a black dress is either a waitress or a problem. If he'd known which, he would have smiled different. Trina moved through the crowd like a woman who had learned to measure distances. She touched 4 hands, nodded twice, and didn't look at me. On her third pass by the AV table, she dropped a small thumb drive into a pocket in the black drape and smoothed the drape down. Her face didn't change. A man running sound had a wedding ring and the posture of someone taught to fear losing a job. He looked down when she stepped near him, because a coup always smells like a paycheck. Norwood and his detectives occupied the corners, the way shadows do. Mercer arrived in a suit that fit like it had been borrowed from a better man and stood near the exit. He didn't meet my eye. He met everyone else's and told them nothing. At 8:59, the NC, a local news anchor with hair trained to behave, stepped up and read a speech about the future with the kind of joy that comes when you've only ever lost money at a casino. He introduced the board chair with the reverence of a man who knows where his children got their scholarships. Whitaker Sloane took the mic like a robber lifts a wallet carelessly, because he expects to get away with it. "We are honored," he said. "We are proud. The children are the light." He said light 3 times, and each time it got a little dimmer. He invited the quartet to play something uplifting, and they launched into Fly Me to the Moon, because on nights like this, somebody always does. At 9:01, my heart started beating like drums through a wall. Trina was 10 feet from the AV table, their eyes not on her because they were on themselves. I moved toward the stage. Risa peeled off toward the bandstand with a walk that suggested she had every right to ask for the mic and every intention to use it on good refuses and better songs. Amir remained by the back, hand on the phone he wasn't supposed to have in a federal free-for-all. Lev sat cross-legged on the floor near a column, laptop open, curls bouncing like punctuation when her head moved. At 9:03, the choir phone vibrated in my hand. Practice, her code for go. I hit the button, let it ring once, twice, 3 times, and hung up. Somewhere behind the drape, a script began running toward an edge. I stepped up to the stage-left mic without waiting for an introduction. Men hate when you don't wait. White men in tuxedos hate when a black woman reads the room and decides it's her turn. The MC blinked and held his smile like a hostage. Whitaker Sloane's gaze tried to push me off with nothing but itself. My knees threatened mutiny, and remembered my mother raised them to stand. "I'm Maya Bennett," I said into the mic. "Jimmy Blue's daughter. Some of you came to his funeral. Some of you came to the club when the shooter stayed home. Glad to see you tonight for the children." There was a murmur, the kind of social noise people make when a woman they did not invite uses a microphone they think belongs to them. I want to play something. Just a simple hymn. "Nearer, my God, to thee" is not a complicated song. It only feels complicated when you owe it something. I sat at the piano and put my hands on the keys like a girl at a recital, whose father had not come because he was making music that he thought was bigger than her. Then I played the hymn backward, slowly, the way you walk in a neighborhood you love when a car you don't recognize rolls by slow. The room's noise shifted in frequency. The women's voices dipped, the men's lifted. The sound tech frowned at the board, as if anything on those sliders could fix what my fingers were doing. On my third measure, Trina pressed SE&D on the back-end ping. In the corner of my eye, I saw her face in profile. She didn't smile. She breathed. Somewhere in an office, a server said okay. Somewhere on a block my father loved, a freezer said keep. At 9:07, Liv's mouth fell open. Her finger traced lines across a screen like a conductor. "Oh my God," she whispered, and then louder because adrenaline erased discretion. "It's moving." Money marched across her screen, in numbers that could put roofs on churches and bread in boxes, and women into apartments where men didn't have keys. "Keep playing," Risa said from behind me, voice low like a prayer and a dare. She stood with a mic in her hand and began to hum a harmony that made the hair on my arms lift. The room didn't know what to do with two black women making sound that wasn't about their pleasure. It tried to laugh and couldn't find its note. Raphael closed his eyes and pinched the bridge of his nose as if he had a headache he had chosen. He said something to the young man with him. The young man nodded, and three other men in suits you only find on certain floors of stores did not move the way men move when they are about to make a mess. That told me something I decided to be grateful for later. At 9:08, Norwood took off his cap. On the floor near the stage, a man with a crooked nose and a straight tie put his hand in his pocket. He did not pull out a gun. He pulled out a phone. His thumb swiped. His face went white the way men's faces go when numbers don't obey. "This event is being recorded," the MC said, too loudly, because sometimes that is all a man has. "It should be," I said, not stopping my hands. "For the children." At 9:10, a video popped on the two big screens flanking the stage. Not because I wanted it, but because Trina had wanted it, and because she had smuggled the thumb drive into the belly of the beast and told it to show its teeth. The audio from Wade in the Water 03_01 filled the room, the whisper shaped into words. Canaan storage. Back row, left, left, right. Henderson Diffs 341. The numbers, the dates. The kind of truth that when played on a good speaker makes a man's breakfast go cold in his throat. A woman near the front gasped and put her hand over her son's ears. The boy took her hand away because he wanted to hear the world he lived in. Whitaker lunged toward the AV table. Norwood stepped in front of him not with violence, but with a body that had been trained for years to get in the way. Two detectives approached the stage like they were simply changing jobs. Raffi exhaled smoke that wasn't there. Amos from the church 2 blocks over began to cry like a man who remembered every coat drive that should have been bigger. At 9:12, the server doing the work of God with a keyboard finished the last task in the script. Money emptied into accounts my father had written on index cards when I was asleep down the hall. Ash Wednesday last drop. His hand had trembled on the ledger last line. The algorithm logged out. The choir line went dead. The screens went black. I took my hands off the keys and stood. The room had the silence of a factory after the shift whistle. It was not reverent. It was what happens when the math changes. Whitaker found his voice. "This is a private event," he declared, which is the kind of sentence men use when they have lost control of their nouns. "You," he looked at me, "have just committed a felony." "Possibly," I said, "in furtherance of stopping several. You can tell your counsel to meet us downtown." Norwood stepped to the mic because it was time for a badge to be louder than the room. He introduced himself, the charge codes, the statutory phrases. He did not say the word corruption. He said laundering and bribery and diversion of charitable funds. He said sealed warrants. It sounded like sky opening. "And you," Whitaker said, turning on Trina at last, because morality always eats a woman first. "Traitor." Trina didn't look at him. She looked at the boy with his mother's hand and at the men by the door who had learned something about their own line tonight. "I paid the tithe," she said. 10% wasn't enough. Two men in suits put their hands on Whitaker's arms, not because he was under arrest yet, but because he had started to look like a bridge that might walk away from itself. The MC said, "Ladies and gentlemen," in a voice cracking like a wet stick, and we all ignored him. The rest of the night did not unfold like a movie. It unfolded like paperwork and handshakes that pretended to be respect and a line of donors who realized their names might be mud. Norwood took my statement in a side room with carpet that had done too much work. He asked me to tell my story twice, then in reverse, then forward again. I did. He told me to keep my phone on. I told him it was back on already, because my mother taught me to answer when adults called. Raffi found me by the service hallway, where the staff were wrapping silver in polyester napkins. He leaned on the cinder block like it owed him support. The hallway was colder than the ballroom, like the practical part of the building, and not the pretty. "You made a mess," he said, not unkind. "You could have stopped me," I said. "I don't stop women at pianos," he said. "And I don't bleed in rooms with children. I am sentimental in that way." "You going to come for me?" I asked, because the tremor deserved its question. He weighed the thought. "No," he said finally. "Not now. Not like that. There are worse men than me who will try." "You should not be alone." He straightened and sighed. "Your father once played a song for my sister. It didn't fix anything and made us both think it had. He would have hated this party. He would have loved you tonight." "He loved the crowd more," I said, and heard my mother's voice in my mouth. He shook his head once. "He loved himself more." "That's a different thing. You chose the crowd. That's why you scare me." He touched 2 fingers to his forehead like a salute. He had learned from a better movie and walked away into a doorway he had not paid for. Trina sat on the edge of a catering cart, ankles crossed, folder on her lap again, because she did not know what else to hold. "You'll be charged," she said. "They'll call it unlawful access. They'll try to call it theft. You'll need a lawyer who saves her best language for judges." "I am a lawyer," I said. "You know what I mean," she said gently. "I'll be charged too. Maybe I'll take a plea. Maybe I'll fight. Maybe I'll write a book if I have to feed my child, and nobody will hire me. But tonight, money went where it needed to go. I can do a year on that." "You have a child?" I asked. It came out softer than I expected, and it changed her face. "Yes," she said. "He is 9 and loves things that scare him. Like heights, like math." "Tell him he did good tonight," I said, and Trina's laugh was small and sharp. Norwood found us then and told us the next hour plan. Leave via the loading dock, not the front. Don't go home if someone is following. Call him before we call anyone else, because his badge could make a few phones answer who didn't pick up for women without one. He thanked Trina in a way that wasn't performative and made me like him more. He told me he hated pianos at events. He told me I had given him a reason to bring his wife to church. On the way out, the alderman tried to shake my hand. I let him take air. His smile formed a line between things and tried to be a bridge. It collapsed under its own weight. Outside, the night breathed better. Amir took my hand and then dropped it quickly because Norwood was there, and men like to remember they are in a room with badges. "You okay?" he asked. "No," I said, "but I'm hungry." We went to night kitchen, which was half full at 10:30 because the city still had people who worked when the rest of it didn't. Mercer put 3 plates down in front of us without asking what we wanted, like a good doctor who sees your eyes. The hush puppies tasted like a man's apology done right. He put a hand on my shoulder as he passed and left it there, just long enough to be human. "Check your freezer tomorrow," I said. "I check it every day," he replied. "I like keeping things cold." He leaned down. "Also, one of my servers says to tell you that woman with the perfect nails came by asking for carrots." Henry got chatty, I said. Henry got paid, he said. We're all sinners in this establishment. The Ember Room, 2 nights later, felt like a body that had decided to live. The neon flickered from M to Ember, then settled on Ember as if it remembered its job. We had new locks and a man from Reese's church sitting in a booth near the door with a book. Ike came in on a cane. He made look like a prop and argued with a pigeon outside for old time's sake before he told me I was still too skinny and hugged me, the way old men hug when they don't know how long the body will sign off. "There've been worse fights in this room," he said. "We still standing." Band practice turned into a set when people started hearing music through the cracked window and wandered in. A boy from the neighborhood took tips in a coffee can. Auntie Risa took the stage and sang "A Change Is Gonna Come," like a woman who had lived in the parentheses between promises and wrote her own words there. In the corner, Liv hunched over a notebook with numbers and arrows. Her resignation had landed with a thud and a shrug. She had 2 job offers already that paid less and would let her look in a mirror. Tyler sent a 1-line email. "Good luck. Remember to keep it classy." I replied with an auto-response, because sometimes the best message is silence with excellent formatting. Trina pled not guilty at arraignment and walked out on her own recognizance because the judge had read the first round of stories and decided not to be a villain on a Tuesday. Whitaker posted bond someone else's money and made a statement on the steps about smear campaigns and regret. Singleton Reed issued something in Latin that meant we haven't been caught yet. The alderman's smile got tired and then went on vacation. Raffy stopped by the club on a weeknight when the tables were half empty and the trumpet was on its 3rd attempt at making a bad day good. He didn't sit. He stood near the stage and let a slow ballad lace itself around his ankles. When I went to him, he kept his hands where I could see them like a gentleman and a man who has learned hard lessons. "Sending someone to touch you now would be messy," he said, as if we were talking about weather. "In 5 years, 10, you'll forget to look over your shoulder, and I will forget your name. That's mercy." "You'll never forget my name," I said, "because sometimes you get to have the last line, and you can't waste it. And if I die soft, it won't be your doing." He smiled that careful smile that suggests the piano is falling in another room. "Mercer's freezer is very clean," he said. "You have good friends." "I have better friends than I deserve," I said. "That's grace." He nodded, then looked at the stage one more time, as if music had always been a temptation he wasn't supposed to touch. "Your father was a liar who learned to tell the truth in the only language left to him," he said. "He wrote the word ash as if it could save him. Maybe it saved you instead." He put his fingers to his forehead, a farewell, and this time it looked like an actual prayer. Norwood came on a Sunday afternoon when the light through the front windows made the dust look like confetti you could breathe. He had a file under his arm and a wound in his laugh that he didn't show everyone. He sat at the bar and asked for ginger ale and looked at the photos on the wall as if he had been in all of them. "We got warrants on 3, he said. Henderson's board chair and 2 of the board's friends. we'll get 2 more. Singleton Reed will pay fines large enough to feed a ward and call it a day. You'll testify. You'll be tired. You'll be told to smile a dozen times. Try to do it when it's yours. I can smile, I said. I can also play. He nodded to the stage. You going to keep this place open? For now, I said. We'll cook on Sundays and let kids in on Tuesdays and pay musicians honest. We'll put a box by the door that says bail, bus fare, braces, and see who puts what in. We'll put Ash Wednesday on a calendar as a concert and not a crime. He lifted the ginger ale like a promise. Invite me when you make it a holiday, he said. Amir leaned on the piano with his arms crossed and smiled. You going to ask him to sing? He said. Norwood don't sing, Risa said from somewhere behind a stack of glassware. He hums low like a man building. Amir and I told each other the truth more often after that, because we had learned what lies cost. He kept his bat by the door. I kept a hat by mine. We made a rule about late-night calls that saved us from 3 bad decisions, and one we were both glad we made. When the first snow of February finally fell late and petulant, I walked to Oak Woods and stood by my father's marker and told him about the night I played a hymn backward and turned money into food and shame into paperwork. I told him I hated him and loved him and was going to keep the stage open until the electric company remembered we were alive. I told him Trina said his name like a man she worked with, and Risa said it like a brother she refused to forgive, and Ike said it like a curse and a compliment. I told him he had given me a match and that I did not burn the room down. On the first Ash Wednesday after he died, we put a candle on the bar and lit it and played Nearer, My God, to Thee, forward the way Sunday intended. We passed a basket and paid a woman's light bill and a boy's application fee and a cook's rent. We pinned a paper cross on the wall with tides written over it in my father's block print. We did not say sunrise out loud. We did not say Whitaker. We said names like girls on the honor roll, and we said mercy, and we said lunch. Play me something ugly, Risa said at closing, eyes bright as if she'd spent the day singing and the night arguing with a good God. I sat at the piano. The neon buzzed, steady for once. The green line rattled. Outside, Bronzeville worried and hustled and laughed the way it has always worried and hustled and laughed. I put my hands on the keys and thought of Friday nights and kitchen tables and knives and forks tapping measure. Then I didn't play the hymn backward. I played something that started as a bad idea and turned into a map. I played the music I had, which was memory and refusal, and a promise written on a check nobody could cash. And for a minute, the room filled with ash that glowed. When I stopped, the silence wasn't a hole. It was a door. Someone in the back whispered, Amen. Then the door opened and new trouble walked in believing it belonged, and we made room, because that's what we do when the song says so. Not every story ends with justice. Some just stop where the paperwork does. But if you listened closely, this wasn't just about what happened. It was about what we ignore, the assumptions we let slide, the voices we tune out because they don't come in the right tone. Somewhere, someone's living with the fallout of this story, not as a headline, but as their everyday. So if this story stayed with you, don't let it fade. Shine it forward. Ask more. Doubt what's too quiet. Because what we choose to see, or not see, decides what happens next. Like, comment, share, not for clicks, but for clarity. Because awareness is how silence breaks, and how truth finds daylight.